This episode is proudly supported by Pepe Sayer Australian Cultured Butter.
At Pepe Sayer, we focus on quality. So if someone comes into your restaurant and they see you're using Pepe Sayer, they know immediately that that is a quality product you've got in front of you on the table. And that comes from a decade of just doing quality butter day after day.
For more information, go to pepesayer.com.au.
When I walk through, one of the people I've known for a while, it's like, is it strange whenever I look at you, I think of coffee? So, I guess, I've been dubbed throughout my friends as the coffee person.
This is The Producers. I'm Dani Valent. Reuben Mardan is the founder and owner of Sample Coffee, a cafe, roastery, retailer and wholesaler in Sydney. Reuben first worked in coffee as a side job, but his interest and engagement grew as the specialty coffee scene burgeoned. The first Sample outlet opened in 2011. After a decade in the business, Reuben still finds the industry enriching, especially because it allows him to connect with people at the source of production right through to those who drink it.
G'day, my name's Reuben Mardan. I run a small coffee roasting business in Sydney, and we have 3 shops, one in Surrey Hills, one in St Peters and one in Chippendale. My first memories actually was when I was growing up. I was in Leichhardt, and I had some friends, a family across the road, the O'Sheas, and they were Italian, and on Saturdays they would make little coffees for all the kids, and so that was kind of my first introduction to coffee. That's going back, and then further on in high school, being social and whatever, we'd go out and have a coffee and continued on from there. I guess coffee was a bit of a side job while I was at school and out of school, and I started to study business, and I don't know, I just wasn't in love with being behind a desk, and I wanted to be more hands-on, and coffee was just starting to really become exciting, specialty coffee, and I always liked machinery, so I kind of enjoyed working with coffee machines, and I was working at Single Origin roasters when they just opened, and I decided to sort of go full on in coffee and give it all my attention. And so from there I worked there for a couple of years, then worked at Mecca Espresso when that was sort of really starting to open up, and then I ended up working for Mecca for about 5 years, but always I had the desire to open my own business. So 2011 I opened a small espresso bar in Surrey Hills called Sample Coffee, and we were using Mecca for our blend, and we were rotating through different roasters. I think we were kind of the first person to do that in Sydney, hence the name Sample.
Food people often have a gateway moment, an experience that turns a job into an everlasting passion. When and where did the angels sing for Reuben Mardan?
I guess my first sort of coffee epiphany, I was travelling and I was in Seattle. I think this was 2003, and I did a public cupping at a roastery in Seattle called Vitrola, and one of the coffees, when I tasted it, tasted like blueberries, and it was kind of that sort of epiphany of oh my God, I can taste different flavors in coffee. And this was a coffee from Ethiopia, a region called Harar, which is the north, which is pretty dry, and a lot of those coffees, which we haven't seen for many years, show those flavors of blueberry notes, and it was a bit of an eye opener. Well, that's when I came back, and I worked at Mecca, and so Paul, who's the owner of Mecca, he purchased a roaster, and that's when I sort of took over the roasting of that, and I guess we just tried to find coffees that were as interesting as that. And that's always been the mission, I guess, from then to now, is just, looking for really interesting coffees to share with the customer. So hopefully someone else can have that experience.
Loving coffee is one thing. Working in coffee is another. How did Reuben make the transition from employee to business owner? And what values is Sample founded on?
Yeah, so 2011, opened a small 20 square metre espresso bar in Surrey Hills. I guess back then we were, showcasing different roasters. Then 2 years later, I guess I had a background from when I was working at Mecca and Single Origin of roasting coffee, and I really missed that and wanted to start doing that again. So we bought a roaster, a refurbished German 1957 Probat roaster. So once that was in the process of being shipped over, I had to find a location for it, and I was hunting around sort of the inner west, Marrickville, for a warehouse, and I came across this warehouse in St. Peter's, a place called Precinct 75 on Mary Street, and the owner had a great vision for the space and how we could have a roastery and cafe, and so moved in here. And then just before COVID, opened a shop in Chippendale, which is probably the worst timing, Old Gold. And so that's where we are. And we have a bunch of great wholesale customers we work with, and we sell coffee online. We want to be a sustainable business as much as possible. And, that's the most important thing is to be paying a fair price for everything that you use and the staff that you have, and so that, I guess that's our main ethos. So we buy high quality coffee. Everything we purchase is fairly paid a fair price, and the same with how our staff are.
Long-standing relationships with producers are a big part of the Sample ethos. It's about ensuring fairness and increasing quality. Ongoing reliable income means farmers can invest in improvements with confidence. It's a win for them and also for coffee drinkers in faraway Sydney.
I have travelled to Origin a few times to meet some of the producers we work with. This was before COVID. And we just try and have some long-standing relationships with these producers. So I think there's a couple of producers that we have worked with now for 5 or 6 years. We tend to purchase all or a majority of the coffee that they farm. So once the coffee is milled, then we get a sample, and then we pay a price for the quality of the coffee. So it kind of incentivize them to grow higher quality coffee. And the more higher quality coffee, the more they get. So it's been really interesting to see how some of these farms have developed, from the greater income they've earned. And their coffees are, quite amazing right now. Every farm throughout the world is so different. Most of my travel has been in Colombia, where they're a very small farmer. They might have, say, 2 to 8 hectares. One farmer that we've been working with for the last 5 or 6 years, Marco Fidel Rodriguez, he has 4 hectares. And, it's like a small, house that they have. They don't have a lot of money. But when I was there, must have been 5 years ago, he was just building a new processing mill, and then over the last 3 years we've just received some of the most highest quality coffee from him. And it was lovely. Had lunch with them, which was really nice, and it's just nice to see that working together they've been able to progress like our business has.
Coffee is grown all around the equatorial belt of the world, with enormous variations in beans, grade and flavour qualities. Which beans does Sample seek out, and what's their approach to roasting and sales?
we've always had kind of like a very typical Colombian, a wash cultura, which is the varietal, and it's just like, it's a very, well-structured, nice coffee that's sweet, it's good fruit flavors. And then about three or 2.5 years ago, we got a sample of what the exporter/importer Caravella that we work with in Colombia sent a sample of an X grade, which is basically competition grade, or there's some online auctions called Cup of Excellence. So that kind of grade quality, and the coffee's outstanding. It's like sparkling, so much fruit, and it's really interesting to see that he's gone from just producing like a very, very nice coffee to these top tier coffees. Feel lucky to be part of seeing that progression. It's really nice, and there's a lot of factors involved in that, like the exporter importer Caravella that we work with, that I've spoke to you about. They're a B Corp, and like their whole manifesto is about re-educating, and they have a lot of training facilities. So they've been a big part of that quality. The gain in quality. In Australia, we are challenged by how far away we are from a lot of the producing countries like Latin America or Africa. So we have a little bit less of a shelf life of coffee by the time it gets here. So when it gets here, we make sure it's up to the quality of what the pre-ship sample was, and then we just roast it, and we roast it quite delicately. We roast it pretty light compared to a lot of other roasters, so a lot of those coffees, they're all designed to be drunk either as filter or espresso, kind of without milk. We have our online subscription that we have must be about 300 subscribers, and they sort of have taken part of this journey over the last I think it's been now 5 or 6 years, and each coffee we send out, we kind of give them the story of the farmer, and of course we're not able to, we're a very small company, we're not able to go visit and spend time with all the farms that we work with, but being able to pass on that information, and a lot of our customers have also seen just that journey of, I guess we'll call Marco as an example, but there's a few other producers that have sort of continued to grow in quality. Just trying to pass on as much information as possible. It is challenging because they're on the other side of the world, but we do the best we can.
Australia thinks of itself as having a strong coffee culture, but we are far from the source of most beans. What are some of the challenges Reuben faces from day to day and year to year?
Coffee can be ruined at any point in the journey. We have had coffee that's been shipped, and by the time it's arrived, it's completely ruined and tastes like cardboard. And the same can be done with roasting. You can, to explain quickly, coffee is roasted in batches from between 8 to 16 minutes, and can finish at a temperature of 195 degrees to 200 and I think 30. After that, it's almost going to catch on fire. So you create a recipe which is temperature over time, and in this time that there's chemical reactions that create flavor and caramelization of sugars, and you can go too far and these caramelizations will start to become dark and smoky, and there's a lot of coffee out there like that, and by choice as well, but we choose to sort of roast it quite delicate just to sort of capture the fruit and give it a tiny little bit of caramelized sweetness to it to kind of balance it out. So we just have to be extremely precise in our roasting. it is fun, but it's annoying if, something goes wrong in that roast and, you've got, sort of 10 kilos of coffee that you can't really account for. So that can be expensive.
With coffee a daily requirement for so many Australians, it's easy to take it as a given. What does Reuben see on the horizon for the coffee industry, especially in an environment of uncertainty and rising costs?
The coffee is still booming. I guess with places like China, they're becoming so popular. The demand is so high. I guess throughout the whole of Asia, Southeast Asia, it's become such a trend as well. So the demand is there, as long as environmental factors don't get in the way. Like we've seen this last year, with Brazil had a massive shortage of coffee due to environment, and that's affected the rest of the world's production because all the big roasters have been swarming and buying up all the coffee, hence coffee price increases. I guess only in the last sort of 4 months that we've really seen those prices start to get passed on to the consumer. So I don't know, it's such a strange time throughout the industry. I guess we're in the end of July, beginning of August, and I think there's actually, it's just hard to judge now because there's so many other factors that are going on. I think they said that up to 19% of Australians will be travelling overseas over these coming months. So, there's so much volatility in the market already.
We know he loves coffee, roasts coffee, sells coffee, lives and breathes coffee. But what does the coffee guy like to drink?
Waking up, coffee will be the first thing I'll generally do, and that'll be either a V60 or an AeroPress. And often, go back to bed and drink a coffee in bed if I can. And then, so I guess filter is the way to go for the first couple of hours, and then an espresso or two. And that's about it. I try not to drink too much coffee in the afternoons. I drink enough in the morning, so it's that's fine. And occasionally flat white. Coffee has become my life. It's quite funny. I went rock climbing yesterday in Nowra. There's some climbing along the river there, and when I walked through, one of the people I've known for a while, it's like, is it strange whenever I look at you, I think of coffee? I'm like, no, you're not the only one. So, I guess, I've been dubbed throughout my friends as the coffee person, but, it's nice. It's a nice industry to be in, and, it's I don't know, it's a good place to be, so I can't complain.
Reuben Mardan has spent years embedded in the coffee world. Whether it's tinkering with a machine, cupping with his team, travelling to the source, or chatting flavour profiles with loyal customers, he finds it an endlessly interesting world. Being that coffee guy is actually a joy, and there's much pleasure in knowing that sample coffee is a crucial day marker for so many people in Sydney. This is The Producers, a Deep in the Weeds production. I'm Dani Valent. Stay tuned as we talk to some of Australia's best farmers, makers and growers. Follow us on Instagram at Producers Podcast or contact us via deepintheweeds.com.au.